Good evening, everyone. Welcome. So we'll start the session. Firstly, we do the praise to Manjushri tonight on page 1, and then we'll do the refuge. I pay homage to the Guru and Lord Arya Manjushri. Your intelligence shines forth like the sun, unclouded by the two obscurations. You hold the scripture text in your heart, symbolic of the seeing of all things as they are, and those who are caught in the prison of samsara are confused in the darkness of ignorance and are overwhelmed by their sufferings. In 60 ways with your speech you teach migratory beings to whom you are compassionate as the only child. Your proclamation of Dharma is like roaring thunder, which awakens beings from the stupor of delusions and frees us from the iron chains of our karma. You wield the sword of wisdom, hewing down suffering wherever its sprouts appear, clearing away the darkness of ignorance. Primordially pure, your princely body is the embodiment of perfection of Bodhisattva dwelling on 10th Bhumi. I pay homage to Manjushri, who dispels my ignorance, whose body is adorned with the 112 marks of Buddha. With the brilliance of your wisdom, O compassionate one, illumine the darkness enclosing my mind. Enlighten my intelligence, wisdom, so that I may gain insight into the Buddha's words and texts that explain them. Omara Bhajana Amara Bhajana Amara Bhajana Amara Bhajana Amara Bhajana Amara Bhajana Omara Bhajana Amara 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 Omara Bhajana. So now on page 9 we do the refuge. O Zanje Jada Zoje Jonala Chanjo Bada Dane Jazuje Dage Jenye Jeba de Dage Rala Benja Zanje Jobajo Zanje Jada Zoje Jonala Chanjo Bada Dane Jazuje Dage Jenye Jeba de Dage Rala Benja Zanje Jobajo. In Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of listening to these teachings, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all living beings. Zemje, damje, dewa, da, deve, juda, and embara, juje, donga, da, donga, je, juda, dawara, juje, donga, mebe, dewa, da, me, dawa, juruje, nere, chada, nyeda, drave, danyala, nebara, juje. May all living beings have happiness and the cause of happiness. May all living beings be free from sorrow and the cause of sorrow. May all living beings not be separated from the bliss that is sorrowless. May all living beings live attachment and hatred towards near ones and far, but living with equanimity. May all living beings have happiness and the cause of happiness. May all living beings be free from sorrow and the cause of sorrow. May all living beings not be separated from the bliss that is sorrowless. May all living beings live attachment, hatred towards near ones above, living with equanimity. Now we do the Heart Sutra in English on page 5 and 6. To the perfection of wisdom, Blessed Mother, I pay homage. And thus I've heard at one time, Blessed Bhagavan One, dwelling in Rajgiriha and Vulture's Peak, together with a great assembly of Sangha and a great assembly of Bodhisattvas. At that time, the Blessed One was absorbed in the samadhi of enumeration of the phenomena called the profound illumination. Also at that time, the Bodhisattva, the Mahasattva, Superior Avalokiteshvara, was contemplating the meaning of the profound perfection of wisdom, and he saw that the far aggregate also empty of inherent existence. Then, through the power of the Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra said this to Bodhisattva, the Mahasattva, Superior Avalokiteshvara: how should a son or daughter of good lineage refrain, who wishes to practice profound perfection of wisdom? Thus he spoke, the Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, Subhiravalokitesha, said this Bodhisattva Shariputra. Shariputra, whatever son or daughter of good lineage practice profound perfection wisdom, should view in this way. They should correctly view those who are aggregates also as empty of inherent existence. Form is emptiness, emptiness of form. Emptiness is not other than form, form is not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, discrimination, composition of factors, consciousness are empty. Shariputra, in the same way, all phenomena are merely empty, that is, without characteristic. They are not created, they do not decrease, there is no impurity, they are not devoid of impurity, they do not decrease and increase. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness there is no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no composition factors, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no form, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, and no phenomena. There is no I element and so forth up to mind element, and also up to no element of mental consciousness. There is no ignorance, no exhaustion of ignorance, and so forth, up to no aging and death, no exhaustion of aging and death. In the same way, there is no suffering, no origin, no cessation, no path, no exalted wisdom, no attainment, also no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, because Bodhisattvas have no attainment, they depend on and abide in the perfection of wisdom. Because their minds are without obstructions, they are not without fear. Having completely passed beyond all error, they go to the completion nirvana. All the Buddhas that abide in three times, having relied upon the perfection wisdom, became manifestly perfect Buddhas in the state of unsurpassed, perfect and complete enlightenment. Therefore, the mantra of perfection wisdom is the mantra of great knowledge, the unsurpassed mantra, mantra equal to the unequaled, mantra that thoroughly pacifies all sufferings. Because it's not false, it should be known as the truth. Mantra of perfection wisdom is proclaimed. Tadyadam gade gade para zangade bodhisattva. 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 Tadyadam gade gade Parazangade bodhisattva, dadyadam gade barang. 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 Parazangade bodhiswaha. Shariputra, Bodhisattva, Mahasattva should practice profound perfection wisdom in that way. Then the Blessed One arose from the Samadhi, said to the Bodhisattva, the Mahasattva, Superior Avalokitesha, well done, well done, well done. One of good lineage, it is just so. One of good lineage is like that. Profound perfection of wisdom should be practiced just as you have taught. Even the Tathagatas will rejoice in this. The Blessed One having so spoken, Venerable Shariputra, Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, Superior Avalokitesha, all those gathered there in those words, gods, humans, demigods, Gandharvas filled with admiration, praise the words of the Blessed One. We're going through the fourth chapter of Nagarjuna's Precious Garland, advice given to King Gautamiputra, in which it consists of 5 chapters. And of these 5 chapters, each of the 5 chapters got 100 verses. This 4th chapter is mainly advice to the king personally on running the affairs of royal policies. Here in this particular part we have come last week, is the showing the difference between the lesser and the greater vehicles. What we call lesser vehicle is regarded as a method of emphasizing for one's own personal liberation, whereas the greater vehicle is emphasis on the method with which incorporates and embraces the well-being of all others. Others' importance more emphasizing rather than oneself. So here, since it says that the difference between the two types of vehicle, one is small vehicle, meaning it carries only oneself, rather like a mini, whereas a great vehicle is like a big vehicle, like a bus, because it carries so many passengers. So Bodhisattva is the lesser, is the the second one, greater vehicle called Mahayana, and the individuals who only look after themselves are considered to be lesser vehicle. I mean, a lesser scope. It's mainly orientated with oneself, which is mean and small. So they call lesser means small-minded, and greater means courageous-minded. Even though one may not be quite adequate to do for the benefit of others, but one is courageous enough to risk oneself to rather do for benefit of others than for oneself. So here, this verse number 367 goes to distinguish or to talk about the faults of those who do not understand the virtue of adopting a greater vehicle, and those who deride and the greater vehicle. So almost like warning the danger of being small-minded and being negative to the people who adopt a greater scope. So since the collection of merit and wisdom of the bodhisattvas were taught by the one thus gone means Tathagatas, in the great vehicles. So in the Mahayana teaching it is taught that that the bodhisattvas, or those people of greater scope mentality, they need a collection of merit and wisdom to be bodhisattvas. They have the huge amount of merit and wisdom to warrant being a bodhisattva. Those who are bewildered about the full extent of the path and fruits of great vehicle deride them out of antagonism. So meaning those people who are true bewildered by almost saying it's how impossible. It's a nice idea, but actually it is the difficult length of time and the many different methods that you have to adopt, and so the all kinds of sacrifice that one has to make to develop to different levels of path and to yield the actual fruits of Mahayana is very difficult. So they basically dissuade and discourage about the difficultiness of the achieving the fruits through the practicing of the great vehicle, and they do so out of their aversion to the great vehicle. So this is Nagarjuna is talking about, because those days he definitely faced. Nagarjuna is the probably you can call it hated person for those who think he's a bit of a breakaway group, who therefore created the great vehicle school. And he's in this writing he says those who disparage a greater vehicle are doing that because of their antagonism, so he's going to talk about that. Furthermore, talk a little bit about that, either through not knowing the good qualities of altruism. So he says, must be the reason why they are antagonistic to the great vehicles. So either through not knowing the great quality of altruism, so people who don't know the merit of altruism, so maybe that's one reason, and defects of self-cherishing. So they neither know the benefits of selflessness, and nor do they know the defects and the faulty nature of selfishness. So this, if one doesn't know the benefit of cherishing others, one obviously doesn't know the harmfulness of cherishing oneself. Or the third possibility, or identifying good qualities as defects, or through despising good qualities. So there are these possibilities why they actually deride or despise greater vehicle. Must be this one of these reasons. Maybe say we do not philosophically adopt such view, but sometimes we might feel we haven't really felt, even though we read the list of benefit of selflessness, but we haven't actually seen one, So we might condescendingly say, yeah, it's a very nice idea, but it really doesn't work, type of thing. So we might disparage the great vehicle, or one doesn't see the demerits of selfishness. Even though one believes that the selfish is bad, but when actually one does just that, and then with that, then one disparages the ideals of Mahayana. It's like a idealism, but not realistically possible to do, because they become somewhat. But it's quite true too, and most people become a little bit, wow, who can do that type of thing? It's amazing idea, but. And who has such merit to be able to do that as they believe, Believing in one thing, being able to do is another, isn't it? So there's not it doesn't mean you shouldn't be a person of lesser vehicle. It has to be lesser vehicle, transformed person to become a greater vehicle, isn't it? Isn't it? So. I know quite a lot of people in Australian Sangha, lay people who were many years practice Buddhism in Thailand and so on. They did a lot of practice, and then of course maybe. When they're not exposed to Mahayana doctrine, of course they adopt the views what is expressed in the literature of that school, which may not necessarily say deriding things, but may not say that's not quite right type of thing, But slowly they actually realize, no matter how much discipline and meditation I do, but if I'm doing it just for myself, it's a bit of a worry. And then they change, then they change, and then they embrace Mahayana. So, therefore, it is possible that when we are deriding or when we are despising greater vehicle, it's due to our own inadequacy and realization of the defects of selfishness, or not having experienced the benefit of selflessness. But if we are adequately informed to see the someone else's in our lives selflessness and kindness shown to us or others, we have witnessed the benefit of selflessness, someone's kindness. If we have one such person in every unit of place, of people, would be great. Then we feel that person's selflessness and merit of it is something we don't read in scriptures, but we also actually seen someone do, and how much invaluable that is. Because what is written in the text could be like a poetry. But what is not done, if it's not done, what's the benefit of reading poetry? So it's just like a poetry, really. So, but when actually one sees like our mother or father or husband or mother or sister do that, those selfless things, we become really witness of the merit of the good quality of selflessness. And the defects of the opposite. When we are unless we are that, we usually would hesitate. This merely being an ideal and not quite able to do. Some people therefore call Mahayana idealism, as it is an ideal thing, and it's this sort of high ideals, but very difficult to actually be able to do it unless one is adequately cultivated. Yes, so that's why it's a great vehicle, and so he says these are one of the possible reasons why we and like-minded people cause derision, despise the great vehicle. Those who deride the great vehicle, knowing that no harm, knowing that to harm others is defective, and that to help others is good quality, are said to despise good qualities. Yeah, so those who deride my great vehicle do those things. Now, the fault of therefore one should learn not to deride a great vehicle. It says those who despise the great vehicle, a source of all good qualities, in that it teaches taking delight solely in the aim of others due to not looking to one's own, consequently burn themselves in bad transmigrations. So this is talking about the defects of not only deriding a great vehicle. So its great vehicle itself is not harmed by the people's despising, but actually how much it harms themselves by doing denigrating others or despising others. Then of course they themselves face the severe consequences of being burned themselves in bad migration, meaning beings who are born physically, or even the physically people are people, but still they're in a very bad state, almost like worse than many other living beings' life. Those situations are actually none other than effect of their own such a condescending, deriding towards other people, such as great vehicle. So even those great vehicle and altruistic people's practice is source of benefit and happiness for others, it's a cause of taking delight and rejoicing these. But those who do not do that, but do exact opposite, will suffer the consequences. So here, in many ways, a warning that despising someone or something like the great vehicle, which is a cause of benefit to others and to many, but those who do take delight in denigrating them, they will themselves be the reaper of the harm. They themselves try to harm the great vehicle by deriding. So this mainly try to discourage people a greater vehicle, even if one can't fathom, but one just see, wow, there are such people who can embrace. There may be only few, but it's still possible. So not being very, very pessimistic about being ideal and nobody can do it and putting it down, but even few who do it, a majority who don't do it, still one warns oneself from the karmic consequences, which is the effect of negative karma. One type with faith in emptiness forsakes it through misconception of it as denying cause and effect. Others who are angry forsake emptiness through despising it. So this is talking about the faults of people who do cause derision in greater vehicle. The first type is those who have faith in emptiness. They have faith they have some kind of blind faith in benefit of emptiness, but through the misconception of what actually emptiness is, and then they might even they may negate the existence of conventional cause and effect. Yeah? So that is, of course, nihilism, isn't it? So that's the misunderstanding of emptiness as nihilism, and makes them to then actually ignore the law of causality on a relative level. So that's the danger of maybe the reason people misconceive Mahayana and great vehicle is because of that. The other option, the other likelihood is others who are angry They become angry or jealous or some other negative emotion takes over, and then they say there's no emptiness. And then the emptiness is seen as a not a possible view to realize, and that one actually sees the existence of things, not non-existence of things. So therefore the exact opposite. Previous one is misconceiving emptiness and then denying cause and effect. Yeah, so that's nihilism. This one is that because forsake emptiness, for them everything relative reality is real, So they don't believe in emptiness and become therefore angry at the whole idea of this emptiness. They almost have aversion to emptiness teachings because it's so demeaning to people who like to hold and grasp onto things as truly existing. And even the faithful type is to be burned, that what can be said of those who turn their back through despising it, Even these are the two alternatives. Those people who have faith in emptiness, but misconceive it and then interpret it nihilistically, and others who's the exact opposite of it. Both of them will equally suffer the consequences of despising the great vehicle. So this is talking about extremes of eternalism and nihilism. The reason why people despise great vehicle is either of those possibilities, and as a consequently then falling into the two extremes of nihilism and eternalism. So Nagarjuna is explaining the cause of the people who create derision and despise the Mahayana teachings. Therefore, it is to discourage oneself, even mentally and emotionally, to despise Mahayana or doubt Mahayana, and in order to help people not to doubt about Mahayana's veracity. It says, just as it is explained in medicine that poison can be removed by poison, what contradiction is there in saying that what is injurious in the future can be removed by suffering? So this is talking about the understanding of the medicine and relativity of the medicine and poison. Yeah, because it's the understanding of the medicine that empowers you to remove the poison from the poison. Yeah, and then kept some. By removal of the poison from the poison, still what is left that is not poison becomes the medicine, if one understands that, then it says there is no. What is the contradiction? That what is injurious in the future can be because to say there is harm, the greater harm in the future if you don't suffer the treatment now, even though temporarily one actually suffers as a little bit of tolerable pain, in order to avoid big injuries in the future. So that's why, in order to avoid the devastating effect of the poison, you remove the poison, and the process of treatment all treatment is removing the poison, really, isn't it? All treatment is removing the poison, and so that even though the treatment is painful, hard on the body, particularly like chemo or radiotherapy, people know that, even though it's really, really hard, they do that in order to remove some infectious disease, So you can see, while it's hard on the person, new practitioner Mahayana, this is too much. Mahayana is very difficult. They have this go. Don't realize it's actually removing some future big poisons. By practicing that. So those who have the far-sighted vision, they don't mind the hazard or the hardships, demanding nature of it now, because in the long run it is removing the poison in the future. So it's a treatment so that you do not get sick long time while you go to treatment now. It's like Dharma. Generally speaking, Dharma is medicine, particularly here in relation to the lesser vehicle lesser vehicle meaning small-mindedness and courageous mindedness. Courageous mindedness don't mind the temporary suffering. By suffering temporarily, one is actually removing the poison of the impatience or whatever it is. So the temporary suffering itself is removing the poison, so that it doesn't escalate into a hugely devastating poison in the future. So whether it's a form of by fasting, if you have that intention, two people could be fasting. One is fasting for his health, other is fasting for his merit, Both are feeling mouth dry and hungry and so on. But one's intention is not just to look slim and fit, That's not the purpose, his intention maybe is so many sentient beings go hungry every night and don't get a decent meal even once a day. So therefore I'm doing this time I'm doing this vigil to share the suffering of all beings who many die of hunger and thirst. With that intention, if one fasts, even though it's painful, like cauterization or whatever, but it's a treatment. It's actually trying to stop this me craving, So like that. So therefore, great vehicle is actually removing some poison. In order to prevent that poison remaining in our body or blood long into the future. So at the meantime, you have to cauterize it. People don't do cauterizing or moxibation or surgery because they like it. They say, "Can you please cut here? I really like it." They don't do it because they enjoy the cutting. They have the cut, have the surgery so that it doesn't spread to the next arm or next lung or whatsoever. So this analogy is quite useful, so that if we try to practice selflessness by understanding law of cause and effect, but not thinking everything emptiness, but thinking law of cause. If I practice the cause of suffering, if I uncause the future suffering now by accepting the suffering now, then it's actually removing the few poison that can otherwise escalate. So that is called great vehicle. Great vehicle is a broad mindedness, which therefore have a heart to be unintimidated by temporary difficulties now, but one has a wisdom and insight with which one has the heart and courage to face difficulties now, for it is actually not to give some temporary comfort. That's not temporary comfort is called painkiller, but it's not the actual treatment, Painkiller doesn't actually cure the pain. Actually makes us more vulnerable, less curable by big painkillers, and even say next time same dose doesn't help us. So it's rather willingness to suffer now, increase one's tolerance, distress tolerance ability. So the next time when the same pain will arise, we don't have the same complaint left because we already learned to be strong, So that is a great vehicle is more like a visionary one, one who's tolerant. It's not a school, It's not a school. It's actually more like an attitude. Within us we can see these two attitudes often colliding against each other. It's not two schools. One is south of Capricorn, south of equator, and one is north of equator. It's not like that kind of school. Southern Buddhism, Northern, that type of thing. Even people who are think they think of Northern Buddhism, but they're very selfish ones. So they actually are still the lesser vehicle mentality. So it's not about the geography, but here talking about attitude. So the great vehicle is the attitude of one whose ability to tolerate the hard treatment now to remove the poison, and for he is not injurable in the future by he will not be injurious in the future by going through this treatment. Because he is preventing the future injury by suffering now. So that is what it means by the Nagarjuna's explanation is the person who thinks of that, like say between you and yourself, somebody, maybe loved one, but when you two argue, if you really are just practicing tolerance now, and not only just being nice to them, but this is all good for them and me and our karma. Let me be the one who have to accept this. May all karma that I've been impatient in the past be purified. This, if we adopt that, then we are actually removing the poison, removing the poison, and to prevent such vulnerability in the future. And then, that's future suffering. Future, there is less suffering because one is not creating now. One is suffering now, and so the future we become almost like you develop the antibody to suffering. You don't suffer anymore that time. Why? You have your body and mind is very strong, and see now you're not clinging, and the suffering is not there. Therefore, here it says. Though there is little suffering in the deeds of great vehicles, there are little suffering now because you have to accept the blame, or you have to accept the accusation, or you just have to tolerate and you have to put up with it. But if you put up with the right intention with bodhicitta, then this is the removing of poison they're talking about. Lots of people are patient, but they're patient with the wrong intention. It's not the lack of patience, it's the lack of the intention that is both great vehicle. It's lots of people practice patience just to throw the ball up and down. So mere patient is patient with the nature, patient with rock climbing, patient with surfing on the ocean. All these are also patient, but the intention has to be present. So it's not lack of patience. It's a lack of the intention that is selfless and altruistic. So it says, it is renowned in great Mahayana scriptures that motivation determines the practices. So in Mahayana, the motivation is more important than the outer show of a conduct. Yeah. In the lesser vehicle, it is the impressing the other people, getting the approval of others, so that you are in good books on them, their eyes. But deep down, you may haven't got a very fall short of that. You're simply putting a big display, pretending, but deep down, one doesn't have the good intention. So, therefore, in Mahayana, the emphasis is in being able to spot with whether one has got the right motivation or not. Motivation determine the practice, and that mind is the most important. The attitude is the most important rather than the outer behavior. Society are mostly small-minded. They will be happy with the outer behavior. They have no way of testing your intention. So that's shallow, isn't it? It's a very small mind. They're just happy just because you did it this way to impress them. Deep down, it hasn't got any intention. Hence, how could even suffering not be helpful? Yeah, if your intention is good, suffering is very helpful. It is suffering that makes us innovative to develop compassion. Even compassion cannot be taught or imported. Compassion is not genetic. Compassion has to be conceived consciously, empathetically, by learning and meeting and sharing the sufferings of others. So it is with the suffering. When the suffering becomes made useful, it becomes compassion. When suffering is rejected and despised, then because the intention is there to reject the suffering, but when your intention is to embrace the suffering of the others, then the suffering has been useful. Otherwise, suffering has been wasteful. Hence, how could one, even suffering, not be helpful if one has the right motivation? For one who gives rise to with the real help of altruistic motivation, even suffering becomes useful. It is suffering with work by knowing how to work with the right intention. Then the great vehicle person is cultivated. Great vehicle person is not born from mother's womb. Great vehicles person is cultivated in the womb of suffering, and learning to use the suffering as a cause of enlightenment, not as an obstruction of enlightenment. Now that's amazing, isn't it? The Bodhisattva is unintimidated by sufferings. But he knows exactly, this is exactly what I should make is useful suffering. Useful suffering. When the suffering is made useful, that is when the altruism is now in the making. So the altruism is not a ready-made packages you import and order and then you keep in the cupboard and every time you need it, you just open them. No, it is the utilization, transformation of the suffering, making suffering useful becomes the altruism. Amazing. So that's why this is amazing teaching, you know. This is like our policy of how to live. When you have situations, people, or incidents that are suffering, that are really, really cause of, not only to us, but really suffering to somebody. You know, you just don't want them to suffer, but that's all you see. You can't avoid seeing sufferings, and suffering that affect you more because you care for him or them or whatever it is. But if suffering happened to somebody, it doesn't. So because the suffering and problems exist with and people and the situation who we do not want to suffer. Like a mother who doesn't want her child to suffer will see just that. Amazing. We'll see just that. She will try everything to make him not suffer, but by dint of being mother, she will see the child has no great capacity not to suffer. But they will suffer no matter what protective mechanism, what things you put, whether you can put around the staircase or you put on the door or knobs or whatever. All the knobs are covered, all the corners are covered, but he fell on the flat ground. On the very comfortable blanket, he suffocated. So you can never, best way to not suffer is not be born, I suppose. That's a bit too late. And so the suffering is the only womb of enlightenment. Enlightenment is not some magical dropping from the sky. Enlightenment is the realization how to make the suffering useful. Wow. That is great vehicle. Unintimidated and unintimidated by suffering, but grow and learn, and what this can be best made useful for. You know, amazing these bodhisattvas and great people like Mother Teresa. She made the suffering of people in Calcutta, the leper colony, people suffering. She made their suffering useful cause for her charitable work. Amazing, you know. And it gave real opportunity to test her altruism, you know. It helped her tremendously. Even the amazing writing in the Holy Bible or whatever is otherwise just textbook. But if it wasn't really the suffering of the people with which she lent her kindness and hand, you know, how could a saint grows? How is someone made as a saint? Only when they work with suffering sentient beings and completely give themselves and make their suffering useful for her or him or them to actually do the real work. Because that will test his or her existence or lack of bodhicitta motivation. The other bodhicitta motivation or prayer they recite or many malas they chant or mani padme hum or whatever, these are just religious duty type of thing. This is just like a training something. They have did a lot of training, but in application whether the so many mantras he chant is actually can make him or her capable of transforming suffering into cause of enlightened altruism or anger, or impatience, or discontentment. That's the delineation. That will distinguish what is a great vehicle and small vehicle, not some schools and lineages and traditions. Until we have completely, I suppose, gold-plated our altruism, it is always tarnishable. It will slowly show the true color of discontentment. And for a little while, we were very, very willing. Soon, we just lost it. Why? Because we are not suffering proof. We have aversion to suffering. The bodhisattva has to have the willingness to make each and every suffering and sentient being's problem useful for the cultivation of his or her bodhicitta motivation. Amazing. So that's why when one knows the demerit of selfishness, then suffering of others is causing us suffering. Not that the suffering of others causing us suffering, but our own selfishness is causing, we don't even know it. We think it's the other person's suffering or behavior is cause of our suffering. We don't realize cause of suffering is selfishness because we do not know the demerits of selfishness. But even if somebody does wrong things to you, but if we have bodhicitta motivation, because we are so acquainted with the merit of altruism, just because we can respond to them with bodhicitta motivation, even their instigation become a catalyst for us to cultivate bodhicitta. Why? Because we are so adequately familiar with the merit of selflessness, and their instigation become the cause for oneself to make their childishness or aggression the useful suffering that made us to then it was said that this bodhicitta is like a alchemy, like the elixir that transforms all base metal into gold. So the base metal means all the sufferings. All the sufferings becomes the cause of one's own cultivation of bodhicitta. See, this is that, and so one who gives help with the altruistic motivation, when he has altruistic motivation, other people's suffering or behavior of suffering is now become useful. And so when we have this attitude, that's the time we are fit to practice tolerance, when somebody is aggressive or blaming or whatever they do. But we have to have such a kind of mental fitness to adequately predispose in this way and have that kind of longevity of the predisposition. The short moment of inspiration, everybody have. But being able to hold that predisposition unfailingly, not only in plain sailing, in an extreme situation, one uses that to transform the base metal into gold. That's exactly what it's talking about. If even in ordinary life's pain can bring future benefit, meaning, so when a bodhisattva is suffering and going through the pain in this life, his utilization of this pain with a high cause for his tolerance, this will be a future benefit. Shakyamuni Buddha sat under the tree. His whole royal youthful body, 29-year-old man, very wonderful body, And for him, exposing to the elements of heat and cold and wind and dry and so on. Now his whole body became Rupakaya as a result of being able to do that. What need is there to say accepting suffering? So it's a great vehicle person is the one who accepts the suffering. This is the difference with that. Whereas a person of a small vehicle have no room for suffering. He says no suffering, no suffering, no suffering. He's like no trespasser type of thing. No suffering, no suffering. He doesn't want any suffering. But one who is predisposed to use every single pain and difficulties for future benefit, he more the merrier, so to speak. Whether it's formal practice like devotion or discipline or meditation or maybe whatever person go through the physical body, it's not masochistically trying to harm the body, but he uses that hardships on the body to test his ability to comprehend the virtue of altruism. And not minding his physical hardships, not minding the difficulty he encountered, but still use it as a tester of his goalness, of his intention. So what need is to say accepting suffering. Beneficial for one's own and others' happiness will help. If it's comprehensive, if one has an altruism for benefit of others, will automatically help me. So there's not a single iota of worry of oneself being forgotten or excluded. For long as one is able to emphasize the beneficial purpose and effort for the sake of others. This practice is known as the policy of ancients. The ancients here refers to the enlightened ones, because there are not many around. they're like in the only in the mummified bodies. Maybe they're enlightened ones. So there are not many circulating around. So they are only in the ancients. We can call 84 Mahasiddhas, 16 Arhats, 7 successors Buddha. Yeah, we call it. Yeah, they're just countable. There's just only 7 of them, only 16 of them, out of so many people. Yeah, there are not many people have done it, but doesn't mean more people can't do it. Only if they mentally constitute themselves in adopting that as their policy of how they will live, how they will believe. So this is what Nagarjuna is now hinting the king to adopt bodhicitta. Because he was talking about those who may discourage oneself, but now he's trying to inspire people how to conceive bodhicitta and how to adopt that as a policy of living, policy of life. Because he's the king, remember? If he makes that as his policy of living, then it will affect the people and the subjects and others, because we are influenced by each other, So if you see somebody who's really like that, it inspires. This is the lineage, what you call lineage of inspiration, really. It's not lineage of biology we're talking about. We're talking about lineage of inspiration. Lineage of biology is hereditary. Lineage of inspiration is very, very alive. So this is therefore the practice of the policy of the great vehicle practitioner, the ancient. If through relinquishing small pleasures, meaning now, as a person who adopts this policy of the altruistic mind, then he or she have the capacity to forego and let go small pleasures. They deliberately might even relinquish or renounce. There is extensive happiness later. Yeah, not to just himself, but to others as well. The happiness, I don't know how much happiness Buddha had after enlightenment, but the happiness, that seed that seems to be sort of affecting people is amazing, really. Those who all realize the Dharma and its truthfulness. The kind of happiness that can't be born or cultivated from money or power or possession or positions is completely surpassed by those who have the happiness from Dharma. The happiness, the seed of happiness, seed of joy, and all these things are kind of uncorruptibly there for the future generation to enjoy, so long as they're willing to imbibe on it. They have to have the predisposition to liking for it. Most people will turn it over and not even interested. Real teaching is very difficult. Very few people will take it. Because most people are seeking some temporary enjoyment, temporarily enjoyable something to pleasing for the senses and not have. But those who are able to relinquish the temporary, pleasure, or maybe instead one has to expose to displeasure, discomfort. Instead of staying warm in the bed, one deliberately go out. So one is relinquishing attachment to comfort and cozy things, and then one goes to learn or read or study, and the benefit, great reward it will reward oneself with that. Seeing the greater happiness, you have a much more reliable happiness. Much more reliable happiness that is completely dependent on your positivity. Not on someone else, some miraculous qualities are coming from outside. That resolute should relinquish all small pleasures. So one actually do not complain a lot. The nature of such bodhisattva in the making is he or she complains less. Because complainers are those who complain for not having any pleasure, not any satisfaction. But those who don't complain doesn't mean they don't have difficulties, but they actually use them as a useful displeasure for the cause of greater happiness in the future. People do this all the time, even in just making a living. Oh, they get up 4 o'clock in the morning and baking a lot of loaves of bread they would not eat themselves. Early in the morning, they're baking bread. Before everybody gets up, they have already baked thousands of loaves of bread. Just to make a living, Next example, whether it's taxi driver or Uber driver. Uber driver. There's so many people willing Uber drivers. I couldn't believe it. There's some additional dollars. Anytime, when they're free, they're always in the Uber. Why? Because even just for small pleasures, they're really willing to suffer quite a lot of harsh weather and willing that. If same effort was mobilized by altruism, of course the person would have amazing resilience to experience and never mind, not complain, the difficulties. This is the virtue of making effort to seek the lasting happiness for the benefit of others, and never mind of the temporary difficulties. That is the great vehicle. Great vehicle is the vehicle that actually doesn't mind going on the road. It's not the small Porsche always parked. Always parked and covered garage, and also wrapped in another cloth on top of that. Rustic public buses are always on the road. Isn't it? That's quite interesting. Have you ever seen the action bus covered in cloth? No, always out there. If not driven by you, another driver comes. If not driven by, another driver comes. The Porsche or all those amazing expensive cars in the garages. Then inside the garage is another cover. Yeah. And there's nobody can drive but me, no way. So because he's not showing the enjoyment of being the owner and driver. The rustic bus, for the benefit of people, everybody. It's there for everybody, It's an example is like that. The great vehicle is like that. It's a multitude, benefit of multitude. Whereas a small vehicle is for the benefit of the infinite person, me. Even that is illusory. Have not much reliable happiness. Yeah? And if such things cannot be borne, then doctors giving distasteful medicine would disappear. Yeah, there wouldn't be any doctors left, if he's not giving some very sour medicine or difficult treatment. If they're not giving it for the, never mind the temporary, bitterness or hotness of the medicine, but for the long recovery of the disease totally. So it is not reasonable to forsake great pleasure for the small. Yeah, great-minded people can forsake small pleasures for the big happiness. Big happiness. Big happiness. There's a love for all sentient beings. Is for the sake of love for all sentient beings, big love. So you can let go small love. Small loves are usually very hollow, cause of suffering, and not reliable. Like the kind of finite object of love is like that. When the love object is loving kindness towards all sentient beings is not like that. So therefore, one Buddha, in order to practice just this example of himself renouncing life of a prince and a king, and maybe quite discomforting to everyone who is affected by it, including himself, he didn't mind that. That was distasteful behavior to live like that. It is considered very distasteful. But don't realize how medicinal it's going to be like, how medicinal it's going to be for his spiritual progress, isn't it? And likewise, most people don't want to do the distasteful things. They want to be doing the tasteful things. That's what society thinks tasteful, but spiritually very distasteful. What is spiritually socially very distasteful, spiritually, what is it, So one has to be daring to be different. Bodhisattvas are very few. And very few who daring to have such things. Even doctors, it says here, doctors giving this medicine would disappear. If it's all about making you feel good now. There are lots of kind of massages. I'm sure you have received some different types. Somebody said, this is going to be a very hard one. Do you really want a hard one? It's a really hard one. Yeah, if you really want a hard massage, it's excruciating. Oh, God, you really wish you did never ask for it. But in the meantime, you actually never mind, because it's going to be feel good after maybe a couple hours, maybe whole day. You don't mind, yeah? Actually, it's excruciating, Some of the Indians are amazing. They just beat you. They just hit you. They just elbow you. They just funny. Have you seen the Indian massage? Head massage in the barber? But if somebody did that in a train, you will sue him. But on the barber's chair, you pay him. So you can see that it's only the attitude. It's not so much really what happens to your head. Oh, you hit on my head. But when you ask to sit on the chair, he didn't even say he's going to hit you. But that's exactly what he's doing. But unless you have had experience like that, next time, of course, I'm not going to have an Indian massage. or the Chinese massages, Oh, some of them really put their elbows. Oh, God. You don't do it because it's enjoyable when they're doing it. They do it, and you also receive it so that it actually is beneficial later on. Maybe a couple of hours later. Most people wanted to feel good, nice aroma, nice music, hardly anything happening. no tense part has been touched, but temporarily kind of soothing yourself. But deep, the time's over, they haven't done anything, and so it's like that. Quite a lot of the differences. Sometimes what is thought harmful is regarded as helpful by the wise. And general rules and their exceptions are commanded in all the treatises. Yeah, so wise people who have really a lot of confidence, they do that. Quite some of the amazing masters, realized masters, they weren't trying to do the things to make the disciples happy and to make the exact like what they really want. They do the exactly opposite. They make him to do the back-breaking jobs, get his ego tamed as much as possible, and so the very thing that needs to be helpful. That's why they said when Milarepa was looking for teacher, most teachers said, I can't do it, I can't handle you. Oh, you need Marpa. Only Marpa can handle you, because Marpa is able to regard what will be really helpful is just to make the ego of Milarepa feel like almost like mistreated and totally disregarded. And every time he wants to come in, he was expelled. Whereas everybody was included, everybody was received teachings or whatever, he was really hard on him. But what he's saying is, what is thought to be harmful. His Marpas, my wife thought, how can you do that to him, poor thing? He's been here this long and you keep doing this. She even bribed, she even gave her own jewelry to young Milarepa to give it to Marpa so that he doesn't do that. So she thought it was helpful, but actually harmed him. When the intention is there. Marpa's intention is, of course, altruism. And devotion of the young Milarepa was likewise. So that's why sometimes they say, in the quite a lot of old style teaching, they read that all the teachers in many schools used to have a little bit of smacks to the student, particularly the young ones, Even His Eminence remember him being beaten by his teacher, and when he was young, his teacher would bow down to him 3 times, so means it's going to receive some belting. and he'd bow down a few times and then give him a few smacks. And His Eminence feels so grateful because he knew it wasn't intended to harm him, but he says, due to my strictness of teacher, I have received great blessings. So actually it's quite true. Quite a lot of the intention of parents, or they may look very aggressive, but they actually, if you haven't been brought up with strict parents, you're spoiled. But hard though it was then, but they mean it very well. You actually realize, how much you actually been benefited by what appears to be them locking you into the room. They say, go to your room or something. Going to the room is really, really helpful sometimes, but it looks like for the kids who wanted to play and do other things in the other paradise, it's very harmful. But parents do it deliberately to help them. And because of the intention, particularly if it is like the bodhicitta, the motivation, what appears to be harmful is actually helpful by the wise. But ordinary people say, don't do that to him, don't do that to him. I mean, of course, these days, civilized world has a totally different way of thinking what is sane and what is civil. They say, in some people, really dictatorial parents, they think that's good, Others, no. Of course, so that's why there's 2 completely different ways. Wise a few, fool are many. So that's why the difference is there's very seldom there is an opportunity which is agreed and honored by all. Who with intelligence would deride the explanation of great vehicle? So Nagarjuna now summarizing. Why would anyone would bother to deride a great teaching of great vehicle, of deeds motivated by compassion and of stainless wisdom? So if it's great vehicle and necessarily such motivated by great compassion and the wisdom and so nobody will. So therefore, one should develop a predisposition to adhere to to a liking of great vehicle, motivated, inspired by the great vehicle, and then it summarizes feeling inadequate about its great extent and profound path. Profound depth. A lot of people may be inspired, but they feel somewhat inadequate. The extent and depth with which we are required to adhere to it. It's quite true. Most people feel maybe amazed and inspired, but then at the same time they feel, me? Can I do it? And the extent and depth and breadth of it seems like going to take a while before you even understand. Untrained beings, foes of themselves and others, nowadays deride the great vehicle because of bewilderment. They become so fearful, so anxious whether they can do it or not. And then they say, how on earth they're imposing us this idea of altruism, a great vehicle. It's almost like it scares them that they might be made to adopt that. So these are the one who are intimidated. So those who are easily intimidatable ones are the lesser vehicle mind. Lesser meaning small-minded in terms of looking for temporary happiness, but and cannot tolerate harm at all, cannot have the vision to see how small harm now is good for the future, if one has the right intention. So therefore, now proving how, therefore one has to prove that grey vehicle scriptures are not some other people's writing, but the words of the Buddha itself. So this is quite a lot of Mahayana scripture authors do that, because at that time, during Naga's time, there's a lot of oppositions, saying Mahayana teaching were not taught by the Buddha, or they came from some mysterious sources, and so on and so forth. So Nagarjuna was really in that very volatile time that he had a lot of internal Buddhist opponents as well as non-Buddhist opponents who said that the Mahayana teaching is some kind of not actual teachings of the Buddha. So he's now addressing that in this following few verses. He said, the great vehicle has a nature of giving, discipline, patience, effort, concentration, wisdom, and compassion. So he's talking about the 6 parameters. So that's the nature of the one who practiced the great vehicle. The nature of the one who followed the great vehicle actually practices these, such as generosity and so on, with compassion. Hence, how could there be any bad explanation in it? All of these teachings are wholesome, encouraging to give, for instance, in encouraging people to practice self-discipline and have patience to each other, and to be diligent to help each other, have focus and concentration to help others, and have wisdom to not become burned out by your work to benefit others. So how could any negative outcome would manifest or come as a result of practicing great vehicle? He says, so this is what really is great vehicle all about. So what is your reason to doubt? Because all the agenda or all the objectives of the great vehicle are to practice these things. So how could there be anything wrong in this whole body of parameters, which are all good? So he's talking about the outer behavior of the person who has a good altruism. He or she must practice these things. Firstly, they must give. Give doesn't mean things only, but they have to be generous in respecting somebody, or not reacting straight away. That also is a very giving. Giving dharma. You don't say I'm giving dharma and give them 3 books, but then throw at them. But giving could mean that amazing generous. You see, if they blame you, you just see, wow, this is really teaching me type of attitude. If you did that, yeah, of course. How could you expand that as an inappropriate vehicle? It is amazing. So therefore, it definitely is the parameters, 6 parameters. Practicing these constitute only good. Therefore, aim of great vehicle is taught in the great vehicle scriptures. The others' aims are achieved through generosity and so on. So when you are practicing generosity, if you are practicing generosity as a great vehicle practitioner, you practice generosity not to make yourself good or respected or remembered or loved or acknowledged. If you did so, it's not the great vehicle generosity. The great vehicle generosity is practiced by not doing it for one's own benefit, but solely for the benefit of others. Yeah, aims are through this one's own are achieved through patience and effort. So it means if you want to benefit others, you practice the first 2 parameters, generosity and discipline. People who are effective at helping others are usually those who practice these 2, generosity and good discipline. If they have these 2, they will be very effective to help others. For their own benefits, for their own development, there's patience and right effort, diligence. One's own purposes are much more beneficial. So meaning, even to benefit others, one has to first be patient and have the diligence. Concentration, wisdom are causes of liberation. The 5th and 6th parameters are for the actual liberation. The first 4 are 2 to ripen other beings, 2 to mature oneself. And the last 2, concentration and wisdom, are cause of completely liberating oneself from samsara. These epitomize the sense of the great vehicle. So Nagarjuna is then summarizing that what constitute the greater vehicle. Greater vehicle in terms of practicing these things such as generosity and so on with altruistic motivation, without any reward-seeking mind at its best. Therefore, those scriptures had to be word of the Buddha, because even Buddha didn't teach anything but that. So therefore, nobody taught this. Only Buddha taught this. How could you possibly say Mahayana teachings are not Buddha's teachings? Because Buddha himself encouraged to practice this the very thing. He himself reached enlightenment by practicing this. So they look at the contents of the teaching. These are very much in coherent and agreement with the central teachings of the Buddha. The aims of benefiting oneself and others and the meaning of liberation, as briefly taught by the Buddha in the hearer's vehicle, are contained in the 6 perfections. So he says, all those teachings that you think the Buddha taught in the small vehicle are also contained in these 6 parameters. Only thing addition to that is the altruistic motivation, because a lot of non-Mahayanas also practice generosity, have a lot of self-discipline, and so on. But only thing is the intention. Intention for being recognized or loved by people in this life, or intention to gain higher rebirth next lifetime, or intention to please the God, and therefore one is in the good books of the God. So everyone is trying to do something, but with the different motivations. So therefore, here the distinctive feature of the great vehicle is the motivation for the benefit of others. Therefore, the scriptures of the great vehicle are the word of the Buddha. Great, because these very 6 parameters are also practiced by a non-Mahayanist. So therefore, it is also in agreement with even the Theravadins. So how could you say that your practice is Buddha's teaching, that these practices are not Buddha's teaching, when this practice is actually completely coherent with what you're doing? Only difference is the intention with which you're doing. Those blind with ignorance cannot stand this great vehicle where Buddha taught the great path of enlightenment consisting of merit and wisdom. So he says the possibility of those who reject great vehicle are those who are ignorant and do not see the virtue of altruism, how they are contained in the very implicit teachings of the Buddha. Because the Buddha himself taught these things, emphasizing the need to have the union of compassion and wisdom, merit and wisdom, or compassion and wisdom. Because merit is all the 6 paramitas you do. The wisdom is the sixth one. If the 6th one is not intersected with any of the 5 or then it could be any persons, any moral groups or religious or non-religious groups. They try to adhere to do that. So that's why it's a very necessary to know the path of great enlightenment as taught in the Mahayana scriptures. So that's why Nagarjuna is arguing the necessity of the Mahayana literatures on top of the common teachings contained in the Theravada, and the Theravada all small vehicles. Because others could not fathom, could not accept the different features of Mahayana. And he says, no, we have to talk about these Mahayana literatures and authenticate them, because firstly the contents and the structure of the teaching is exactly in agreement with the teachings that are taught in the small vehicles. So how could it possibly not coherent with the small vehicle when the majority of the practices outwardly are exactly in consonant with the practice of the small vehicle? Only thing that is hidden and not so distinct, not so easy to fathom by ordinary people is the intention. So that's why the very intention with which is said that the conquerors are said to have inconceivable good qualities, because the causal good qualities are inconceivable like the sky. Therefore, let this great nature of a Buddha explained in the great vehicle be allowed. So because Buddha's mind is infinite and vast and unfathomable by ordinary mind, how can one possibly say this was not in Buddha's thought? How could you possibly measure the sky and saying this is the measure of the sky? It's immeasurable. So that's why what one can't fathom doesn't mean that is beyond what Buddha taught. That is not contradictory with what the Buddha taught. There will be some we could not fathom because of the smallness of our mind, and even Buddha's discipline. Buddha were beyond. Buddha's disciplines were beyond the scope of Shariputra. So this is talking about Buddha, fully enlightened Buddha's discipline were not within the scope of even arhats of small vehicle practitioners like Shariputra. It's beyond the scope of Shariputra. So why is the inconceivable great nature of a Buddha not accepted? So he's asking the question that because the very teachings and the contents of the teaching of great vehicle is beyond the scope of a great being like Shariputra, why is the very inconceivable nature of the Buddha not accepted? So that means Buddha's mind and these teachings are inconceivable. Inconceivable doesn't mean those that are not understood by others are contradicting with the teachings. So that's why, because the others could not conceive the same as the Buddha, therefore the unimaginable manifestation, the teachings that people say there is not in the Buddha's teaching is not because Buddha didn't teach, but because we can't get it, Buddha taught it, but people with that mentality can't fathom it. So the Mahayana is not what Buddha didn't teach, but Buddha taught it, but there were many who couldn't fathom it. due to their own, limitedness of the intelligence. Yeah. So sometimes it says that it's not so much the problem has increased, but your perspective has increased. The problem itself may be the same, but when your perspective is good, then problem seems like decreasing. But the mind of the Buddha is vast, and you can't fathom it. But if you can allow the fact that Buddha's mind is more inconceivable than our mind, then we say, oh, how can I say Buddha didn't teach mind in the scriptures? As we could know everything, But we don't. We don't even know the common level, let alone inconceivable nature of the Buddha mind, So in this way, almost like we should not try to size the Buddha and his wisdom, and then saying Buddha taught this, didn't teach this. If the Buddha's that very teachings in the Mahayana literatures are not in consonance with the spirit of the general Buddhist teaching, then one can say that. But there isn't any. 6 paramitas are very much emphasized in the small vehicle. So we're only emphasizing the need to practice selflessness and altruism as a motivating reason to practice generosity. If one is practicing generosity to be born wealthy in the next life, it's quite a different thing, It doesn't mean you're not allowed to practice that. Some people are practicing generosity so that they have a nice front seat in the Sukhavati when they die. There are quite a lot of Buddhists, traditional Buddhists always thinking like that. They even try to buy a higher, place where they can put an urn of the mother's ash high in the pagoda, so the higher is better type of thing, so that she actually will receive higher rebirth, So there are a lot of higher levels we could not possibly fathom. The absence of production taught in the gray vehicle and the extinction of the others are in fact same emptiness. So now this is talking about that absence of production means things do not produce by themselves. So absence of production of inherent existence. There is nothing inherently. If it's inherently existing, then it doesn't need to be produced, If there's a production, production shows that there is inherently existing production, independently produced production, independently developed production. It is always depending on, like say, you can say the cement is truly existing. Cement is not truly existing. It's only in relation to sand and gravel and water. Then cement is part of the concrete. But if you think cement is the concrete, then why does cement is not concrete? Because cement is a production of concrete, but not by itself, unfortunately. And there are some cement bags that become concrete when you don't mix with the water and sand, and no use. It is not even a step kit can be used. What do you call gone off cement bag? Some of the jute sacks, and maybe there's some good swimming cement bags are airproof or something, so they last longer. But those in the jute sacks in India, they go off very quickly. I remember, if you buy a whole truckload cement bags, and if you don't use them very quickly, they become concrete and they're no use at all, at all. So, so one has to see the absence of production, absence of inherently existing production, and therefore extinction of others. That means that certain vehicles within the Theravada tradition, talking about that everything is produced from something other than itself. So that, of course, if the cup is produced not by itself, but anything other than itself, then cup could be produced from handkerchiefs. Cup could be produced from walls. Why? Because they are other than the cup. So therefore, there is no other production. Because as soon as the handkerchief ceases, it can become cup. It's extinction of one and production of another. This is a bit philosophically talking about production. So in fact, they are both empty of self-production and other production. Since they indicate the non-existence of inherently existing production and the extinction of inherent existence, therefore let great vehicle be allowed, as the words of the Buddha. He says, so this teaching on the emptiness is not new in Mahayana Buddhism. It's already taught even in Theravada, in the lesser vehicle as well. So don't think that the emphasis of the lack of inherent existence in the articulated in the Mahayana writing, such as mostly writing by the same author, he said one should not reject them because this very notion of no self is already taught in the Theravadan literature. So how you saying the Mahayana teaching is some Buddha didn't teach? Because the very thing they are also echoing is the empty of inherent existence. Not saying that it came from something else and therefore, or it is a production due to the extinction of the other. That is like whatever it is. Maybe the wood has to extinguish as a wood to become fire, But when it's a fire, it's still part of it is wood, If the wood totally extinguish, where's the fire? The wood is still there, but it's changing it into coal or whatever combustible nature there is. So it's still dependent. They're mutually dependent, the fire and the wood. Fire is produced, but wood has not ceased. If wood ceased, there would be no fire. So therefore, the production of fire is totally not by itself, but is dependent on the fire. The fire itself do not burn. Wood itself doesn't burn unless something else burns the wood. So that shows lack of production by itself or by other. So if it's not produced by itself or by others, it has to be depend on something other than these two or an alternative. And so it's not a causeless production. It's not a self-production or other production, nor is a causeless production. It is produced dependently. Whatever is dependently produced is not self-production or any of the other other three scenarios. Because of that, this teaching of emptiness is not new, extraordinarily new Mahayana teaching. Only the different level of interpretation may differ, but otherwise the no-self teaching is already in the fundamental teachings of tenets of the small vehicle. If emptiness and the great nature of the Buddha are viewed in this way with reason, how could it be taught in the great vehicle and other be equal as the wise? Now this is Nagarjuna himself is looking at inequality of these two, to consider one as the word of the Buddha and other as not. You think that when it suits you, then it's taught by the Buddha. When it is your thing, it's taught by the Buddha. But when it's in my teaching, it's not taught by the Buddha. How come? Both the contents are the same. So how could you possibly go on to reject the Mahayana teachings as not to be words of the Buddha? What the one gone thus taught with a special intention, this is talking about the Buddha, is not easy to understand. So it's really good. What it's saying is, you think that this is what the Buddha taught, that is Buddha never taught. You just say so with such confidence. Where do your confidence comes from? He said, you cannot fathom the intention of the Buddha. If you think that, then you have not understood the infinite omniscience of the mind of the Buddha. Because you have to be omniscient to know the mind of the Buddha. Otherwise, how could you claim this is not intention of Buddha or this wasn't teachings of the Buddha? Because the whole idea was that they all think that if it's a teaching by Buddha, they'll accept. But they say the Buddha didn't teach this. Where do you know? How do you know Buddha didn't teach? Because the daily message is consonant with the Buddha teaching that you guys have held. Then why you say this was not taught? Because there may be an occasion Buddha had to teach in that approach to a particular audience. So how could you? You were there every time where the Buddha gave the teachings. You recorded everything Buddha taught. What are you talking about? So actually, like a cornering. How could you possibly pretend to fathom the Buddha mind? Even the Buddha, those teaching the Buddha did teach, is not always easy to understand by small-minded people. Therefore, since he taught one as well as the three vehicles, you should protect yourself through neutrality. Yeah. So don't be so biased against Mahayana teachings, thinking these were not taught by the Buddha and so on, with some minor differences. So therefore, instead of being very offensive to Mahayana teachings, why don't you protect your own self, your own school of view, by adopting a neutral view? Because denying that the Mahayana teaching was taught by Buddha and denigrating that is negative. When the very many teachings that you think were taught by Buddha are found in these very teachings, so how could you take some and reject another? Maybe what you can take some is only those you know is in your text, and those you can't see is because you haven't understood anything. So it's only proof of what you don't know. It's not proof that Buddha didn't teach. It's like saying if the eagle lands on the rock and doesn't fly, it's not a proof there's a run out of space to fly, isn't it? It means run out of his own stamina to fly. So therefore, if you think the Buddha didn't teach this, it's because you couldn't understand the rest of the thing. So this is of course very ancient argument, I suppose. Even sometimes His Holiness Dalai Lama was saying when he had some meeting with some Burmese monks, they didn't think Tibetan Buddhists have any Vinaya. and when His Holiness lists all the bhikshus' vows and what they are and a list of this, they were amazed. They were amazed. So you do have these things. So you have also Vinaya. But previously they just decided that we never had Vinaya. It's a Vinaya, So it's just like that. And it's not that Buddha didn't teach, but what you thought, what you didn't know the Buddha's teaching. You couldn't fathom all the teachings of the Buddha. Because you're not Buddha, therefore you can't understand. It's not easy to understand. There is no fault with neutrality, but there is fault with despising it. He says, if you wanted to adopt a non-aligned movement and not say anything, there is no harm. But if you say the Buddha didn't teach this is the only way to teach it, then you're despising somebody else, which is already not against Buddha's teaching. So what's the benefit of despising someone? When Buddha said, don't despise anybody. So what do you achieve? How could there be any virtue in such a statement? Therefore, those who seek good for others, for themselves, should not despise the great vehicle. So Nagarjuna is not being defensive and protective of things. He rather helping them not to create negative karma by their presumption, and thinking that they know all the things Buddha did teach, they know what Buddha didn't teach, type of thing. So he says that is, you rather should adopt a neutral position than this very negative position. Because by holding this negative position, you are despising. And you are despising the path that is relevant and valid to many thousands. So you will be hurting the feeling of those who follow that, which is already despising and harming sentient beings, which also is the very central tenet of the Theravada or of the lesser vehicle, not to do any harm to other beings. Bodhisattvas, he says, the Bodhisattva's aspirational wishes, deeds, and dedication of merits were not described in the hearer's vehicle. So that's why Nagarjuna say, I can understand. What you couldn't fathom is not explained in your Shravakayana's vehicle teachings. Therefore, how could one become a bodhisattva through it? Of course, you can't become a bodhisattva through it because you don't have it. It's like you haven't got the culture. You can't acculturate anything from it because you haven't got the culture. And so to say that this Buddha didn't teach is, it's like pointless. You can't even fathom what the Buddha taught, but you pretend to think what the Buddha taught was finite number of teachings. So that is actually in itself is denigrating Buddha unintentionally. You think there is a school that should be rejected, but actually it is almost denigrating Buddha's mind, thinking you know all the Buddha mind. How could you possibly measure the sky and then think, oh, this can't be right. Sky is never like that. How could you possibly liken the Buddha mind into small space? It's like the Buddha mind is like sky. In the hearer's vehicle, Buddha did not explain the foundation for a bodhisattva's enlightenment. So Nagarjuna is actually saying Buddha actually did not explicitly teach this Mahayana doctrine type teaching in the Theravada literature. He says we accept that. What greater authority for this subject is there other than the victor? So the very authority of what the Buddha teach is not those who didn't read it, but only one who taught it has the highest authority. The one who taught it is the Buddha, and those who read it is only read the text that Buddha wrote, but doesn't mean that all the contents of the other text should be in that book. So therefore, to say that Buddha didn't teach in the books that you're familiar is like saying that if you haven't seen anybody, that doesn't exist because you haven't seen it. There are many things exist without us needing to know or even relevance to know of their existence. Maybe that very Mahayana teaching is beyond the scope of the small-minded people. Can't you accept that? Or if not, neutral. Neutral will be best. Neither you have to despise something or do the opposite. You just develop a neutral position. How could the fruit of the Buddhahood be superior if achieved through path common to the hearers? He says, how could the Buddhahood itself can be attained if they are not superior than Theravada, the Shravakas? Because Shravakas is considered small Buddhas, Bodhisattvas are middle Buddhas, and the Shravakayana is a small Buddha, and the Pratyeka Buddha is middle Buddha, Mahayana is great Buddhas. So to become great Buddha, you have to practice not Theravada, not Shravakayana or Pratyeka Buddha, but something else, isn't it? So otherwise, you wouldn't be able to say Buddha is a result of a cause. So if the Buddha is the result of a cause, what is the cause? Because it's not practicing the small-minded vehicle. That only produces arhat. So what do you say is the cause of the Buddha? So this argument is almost like as a Buddha, you have to accept Buddha as a causeless result, which it is not. Buddha is actually caused by bountiful collection of merit and wisdom. And therefore, the meaning of the Four Noble Truths and the harmonies with enlightenment. So he says the cause of Buddhahood is in common with the hearer's practice teachings. You talk of Four Noble Truths and enlightenment and so on. So you have to because there's a commonness between the Buddhahood itself, but yet Arhat is not Buddha. Buddha is not Arhat. So how would the Buddha attain Buddhahood in addition to, if he didn't practice in addition to the Noble Truth and the 37 factors of enlightenment? So this is an argument: the Buddhahood cannot be achieved through practicing just for Four Noble Truths and other 37 factors of enlightenment. So Buddhahood achieved necessarily through altruism. So therefore, don't ever say what you don't know. If you say you don't know, it will be fair. But if you say that, because I don't know, it doesn't exist, it's hearsay. It's not to the point, not to the fact. Subject concerned with the Bodhisattva's deeds were not mentioned in the Hearer's Vehicle Sutra. So then again Nagarjuna has said, yes, certain specific bodhisattva deeds are not mentioned in the Hearer's Vehicle. Simple as that. But were explained in the Great Vehicle. Hence, the wise should accept it as Buddha's word. So he says, some are taught in these texts, some are not. So why can't you just accept the idea? It may have been taught in other texts. And this is exactly the Mahayana texts are texts that you don't have or you can't fathom, but still that it is taught by the Buddha because that is taught in a different text. He says, just as a grammarian first has students read a model of the alphabet, so Buddha taught trainees the doctrine that they could bear. So, if you can only read the alphabet and not learn how to write articles, you don't say the Buddha, that you barely know alphabet, and you can't. You say that actually how to read higher than that is irrelevant. You can't. You're actually going to know how to read it. You will know why KNOW is called no rather than Kono. But at this moment, when I'm pointing to the letter K, you have to say K. So don't say there's no with the K and none. It's just a convention. It's not been taught. So don't reject things that you haven't understood. To some he taught doctrines to turn them from evil deeds. To some, for the sake of achieving merit. To some, the doctrines based on duality. So he's talking about how Buddha was fashioning teaching according to people of different levels of intelligence and predisposition. To some, the doctrines based on non-duality. To some, what is profound and frightening to the fearful. Having an essence of emptiness and compassion, means of achieving unsurpassed enlightenment. So this is just saying that Buddha taught many ways to suit it to different levels of intelligence. So therefore, the Buddha didn't teach just one teaching. He taught many things. Therefore, the wise should extinguish any belligerence towards Great Vehicle and generate faith for the sake of achieving perfect enlightenment. So Nagarjuna is now summing up the importance of not arguing what Buddha didn't teach, but still rejoicing the amazing higher teaching Buddha did teach, and therefore arouse faith. Through faith in the Great Vehicle and through practicing what is explained in it, the highest enlightenment will be attained, and along the way, even all worldly pleasures. So he's talking about the merit of embracing the teaching of the Great Vehicle. We'll finish off this. At that time, when you are a ruler, you should internalize. So this is now summing up what has been covered. He's talking to the king. When you are a king, you should internalize firmly the practices of giving, self-discipline, and patience. You should see the virtue of these things within yourself, which are especially taught for householders. He says these first three paramitas are mainly taught to the householders, and which have been essence of compassion, which is one way to practice compassion to people and yourself. Out of compassion, you practice generosity. Out of compassion, you practice self-discipline. Out of compassion, you practice patience. So both oneself and others. However, if from the unrighteousness of the world, it is difficult to rule religiously, then it is right for you to become a monastic for the sake of practice and grandeur. So Nagarjuna says that if unable to, if one is unable to do as a lay practitioner, as a lay person, householder, then one should consider becoming a monastic. It's advised to become monastic if unable to learn these royal policies too inconvenient to practice, which means you should renounce. If you think this teaching doesn't suit you to practice as a ruler, then you have to learn to renounce renounce the very thing that keeps you in the worldly level. So otherwise, we should adapt these very practices, such as generosity first, and then discipline, and so on, step by step, because these are deliberately taught to the householders. If the householder teachings taught to householders is a cause for you to renounce, then why don't you adopt the monastic ways? So, so we'll finish there. Maybe that's a good sign. That concludes the 4th chapter. Now we got last chapter, which then goes to specifically list the Bodhisattva's deeds. The 5th chapter is called Bodhisattva's deeds. So I'll conclude here with the dedication merit. Page 11. By the merit of this may we attain the state of omniscience, defeat evil enemies, defilements, may I liberate all sentient beings from the samsara visions of traveling ways of birth, all their sickness and death. By listening to the excellent precious mind and teaching, whatever boundaries matter have acquired, may all sentient beings become precious and stainless vessels to retain the excellent precious mind and teachings. May the supreme and precious bodhicitta take birth yet not done so, where it has been born, may it increase abundantly without degeneration.